Before you listen, if you enjoy the stories and want to hear more, then please consider subscribing. Most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please take this time to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you'll never miss a story and be the first to hear. You'll also be supporting me. Thank you. When I arrived at the restaurant for our first date, I was feeling optimistic. I had met Mark on a popular dating app and we had really hit it off chatting online. He seemed intelligent, kind, and had a great sense of humor. I thought this could be the beginning of something special. As soon as I sat down, Mark told me matter-of-factly that he had already eaten dinner because he was tired of paying for meals when first dates never went anywhere. I was a little surprised but said I had planned on paying for myself anyway. When I ordered, Mark suggested we split an entree to save money. He then proceeded to change my order to something cheaper on the menu without asking me. I went along with it to be polite. When the food arrived, Mark ate most of it despite suggesting we split. I got the feeling this was his plan all along. The conversation was stilted and awkward as I got the sense Mark was sizing me up, trying to determine if I was worth his time and money for future dates. Things went from bad to worse when Mark asked my age. When I told him I was 40, he bluntly stated, "Well, you're obviously not having kids then, right?" Taken aback, I asked what he meant by that. He matter-of-factly explained that at 40, I would likely have a child with Down syndrome and would then become a burden on my family, friends, and the baby's father. So I would have to have an abortion. I was horrified. Not only was this incredibly insensitive, but also factually incorrect. I tried to educate him that while risks do increase after 35, I was by no means too old to have a healthy child. He shrugged it off, confident in his misinformed opinion. I quickly asked for the check. This was not at all the kind of caring, open-minded person I thought Mark was from our online conversations. How could I have been so wrong? As we left the restaurant, Mark said we should do this again sometime. I politely declined and drove home feeling disappointed and disrespected. In retrospect, there were some red flags in our earlier chats that I overlooked. Mark made several casually sexist comments about women that I brushed off at the time. He seemed very focused on women's looks and his own finances. I got the impression he was looking for a woman to take care of him rather than an equal partner. But I never expected to be treated with such insensitivity and lack of basic human decency at our first meeting. Mark saw me as an object, not a person. He felt entitled to my time and affection without showing me the same respect in return. His comments about my age and ability to have children were utterly dehumanizing. I deleted my dating profile after that night. I was turned off by the whole experience. I used to be excited by the prospect of meeting new people online and hoping one might turn into a meaningful relationship. Now I felt unsafe and unsure of who I could really trust. My friends tried to convince me I just had bad luck and shouldn't give up on online dating. But I was emotionally exhausted. That date with Mark left me feeling judged, objectified, and incredibly vulnerable. I had put myself out there hoping to make a true connection, only to be dismissed as worthless by a complete stranger. Maybe one day I'll dip my toe back in online dating waters. But for now, I need time to regain my sense of self-worth that took such a hit that night. I want to feel valued for who I am, not what I can provide someone else. I need someone who will respect me as a partner, not just a means to an end. The world of online dating can be scary and unpredictable. You just never know who someone really is until you meet them face to face. I let my guard down out of optimism and paid the price. But I won't let one bad experience destroy my faith in humanity. I know there are good people out there. When the time is right, I hope I'll find someone who cherishes and uplifts me. But for now, I'm keeping my expectations in check and looking after myself first. I decided to take a break from dating and focus on myself for a while. I reconnected with old friends, took up new hobbies, and traveled more. It was refreshing to not be sized up as a potential romantic partner, instead just appreciated for who I am. I regained my confidence that had taken a hit that night with Mark. After about 6 months, I tentatively reactivated my dating profile, this time much wiser about the types of people I engage with online. I was more selective, looking for genuine common interests and values. I didn't ignore red flags or give the benefit of the doubt to someone who had made me uncomfortable. Within a few weeks, I matched with Jeremy. He was warm, funny, and thoughtful in our messages. We discovered we share a love of hiking, cooking, and indie films. Our conversations flowed easily. I looked forward to hearing from him. When we met for dinner, I was nervous, but Jeremy put me at ease right away. He asked thoughtful questions and was an engaged listener. We split the bill without any discussion needed. The conversation never felt one-sided or like I was being evaluated. Jeremy walked me to my car after dinner and asked if he could see me again. I smiled and readily agreed. For the first time in a while, I was genuinely excited about someone I had met through online dating. Jeremy and I have been dating for several months now, and I can see a real future with him. He makes me feel valued, respected, and cared for. My terrible first date with Mark had left me disillusioned, but I'm so glad I gave online dating another try. Putting myself out there was scary, but it led me to an amazing man. I still vividly remember the night I met Jeff from the dating app. I had been using the app for a few months, going on dates here and there, but nothing serious. Jeff's profile immediately caught my attention, though. He was cute in a bookish, nerdy way that I found charming. His pictures showed him as very tall, likely over 6 feet, wearing glasses and a kind smile. We started messaging and really hit it off right away, talking about our shared interests, obscure documentaries, foreign films, hiking, and travel. The conversation flowed easily for over a week as we exchanged messages daily, learning little details about each other's lives. Jeff came across as sweet, humble, and genuinely interested in learning more about me as a person. When he finally asked me out to dinner, I eagerly accepted. He suggested a new upscale restaurant downtown that I had been wanting to try. I spent extra time getting ready that evening, carefully choosing a classy outfit and spending longer than usual on my hair and makeup. I felt giddy with excitement as I drove downtown and found parking near the restaurant. The hostess warmly welcomed me inside and led me to an elegant table next to a window. I ordered a glass of wine and tried to calm my nerves, checking my phone periodically to see if Jeff had texted about running late. After 15 minutes passed with no word from him, I started to grow worried. I sent him a quick text, but there was no response. By the time a half hour had gone by with no sign of Jeff, I was beyond irritated. I debated just paying for my wine and leaving, but decided to give it a few more minutes since we had never met in person before. Finally, a full 45 minutes late, a short man rushed up to my table looking flustered. He was out of breath as he plopped into the seat across from me. I was stunned to see he looked nothing like the tall, handsome guy I had seen in the dating app pictures. "Sorry, traffic was crazy getting here," he huffed. "I'm Jeff, though. Nice to meet you." I sat there in disbelief, but politely replied and tried not to let my surprise show. It was obvious I had been completely misled, as he was likely 5'5" and looked very different than his photos. Forging ahead, I hoped maybe his personality would make up for the inaccurate profile. But as the date continued, Jeff dominated the conversation, bragging excessively about himself. He claimed he was fluent in multiple languages, had served on a jury, and even corrected the judge about a law, which the judge then thanked him for. Each story seemed more exaggerated and hard to believe than the last. I smiled politely and nodded along, but grew increasingly bored and disinterested. About halfway through the meal, Jeff excused himself to use the restroom. I checked the time, surprised to see he had already been gone almost 40 minutes now. Just as I convinced myself to ask for the check and leave, a few of the servers approached my table with concerned looks. They asked if everything was all right and if this was some kind of uncomfortable blind date. I explained it was someone I had met online, and he had used very misleading pictures on his dating profile. The staff were so understanding and compassionate. They quickly offered to cover my meals so I could leave right away if needed. I thanked them sincerely for their kindness and took them up on it. I gathered my belongings, leaving cash for a generous tip, just as Jeff returned from his lengthy absence. He looked confused, but I offered no explanation as I rushed out, simply saying I had to get going. I felt relieved to escape the disastrous date, but also disappointed that Jeff had completely misrepresented himself online. Over the next week, Jeff called and texted me incessantly, seeming oblivious to how terribly our date had gone. After his messages became increasingly desperate, I finally blocked his number altogether. In hindsight, there were some red flags I overlooked while chatting on the app, but it's so hard to get an accurate sense of someone solely through messages. I learned to be much more cautious moving forward with online dating after this catfishing experience. Now I always do a video call before meeting someone in person to avoid getting tricked by fake photos again. I also listen to my intuition more during dates. If something feels off or uncomfortable, I don't hesitate to politely end the date early. While certainly unpleasant, the deception taught me valuable lessons. I'm more selective now about who I engage with online and quickly cut contact if something seems suspicious. I also trust my gut instinct when meeting someone in real life, refusing to stay if I get bad vibes. Although cringeworthy, the disaster date made me a more confident, discerning dater. I learned to identify red flags early and stand up for myself if things go sideways. With caution and self-trust, I feel equipped to handle whatever comes my way in the unpredictable world of online dating. My mishaps now make for entertaining stories rather than scaring memories. It was just another regular Tuesday night when I decided to open up the dating app I had downloaded a few months prior. I hadn't been using it too frequently, just swiping when I was bored or had a few spare minutes. Nothing had really caught my eye or seemed worth pursuing. But on this particular night, I was feeling a bit lonely and thought maybe I'd give the app another shot. As I began swiping, I came across a profile for a girl named Sarah. Her main photo showed her mid-laugh, head tilted back, and eyes squinted in joy. She looked carefree and approachable. In her bio, she made a witty joke about always being the one to beat her friends at Mario Kart. I chuckled to myself and swiped right to match with her. Within a few minutes, Sarah had messaged me through the app. We exchanged casual introductions, and before long, we were bantering back and forth with ease. The conversation flowed naturally, and I found myself really enjoying talking to her. Over the next week, Sarah and I continued to message daily. We chat about our shared interests, funny observations from our days, and flirtatious jokes. I looked forward to seeing a notification from her pop up on my phone. Things seemed to be going well between us. After about a week and a half of consistent engaging messaging, I worked up the confidence to ask Sarah if she wanted to meet up in person. My heart raced as I typed out the invitation to dinner at a local Italian restaurant that Friday night. While I had been on dates from the app before, something just felt different about Sarah. To my relief, she enthusiastically agreed to the date. We exchanged numbers and locked in our plans. Over the next few days leading up to the date, Sarah and I texted sporadically, just a few messages here and there to build up excitement. I found myself daydreaming about what it would be like to sit across from her, to hear her laugh in person, to take in those bright eyes and radiant smile. When Friday finally rolled around, I took extra care getting ready, picking out a sharp outfit and even splashing out a bit of cologne. I didn't want to come on too strong, but I was really feeling optimistic about our connection. I arrived at the restaurant right on time and let the hostess know I was meeting someone. She led me to a small two-top table near the back. I sat down feeling a blend of eager and anxious as I waited for Sarah to arrive. After about 15 minutes, I hadn't seen any sign of her, so I pulled out my phone to text her and see if she was having trouble finding the place. She responded immediately, apologizing profusely that she was running behind. She said she'd be there soon and thanked me for my patience. I told her not to worry at all and that I continued to hold the table for us. Another 15 minutes crawled by and the waiter had already come by twice to see if I wanted to order something while I waited. I politely declined. At this point, my anticipation was turning into frustration. I contemplated calling Sarah to get a better idea of her ETA, but decided to give it a few more minutes. Finally, after nearly 45 minutes of waiting, I saw a man approaching my table. My first thought was that he was a restaurant employee coming to tell me I needed to order or give up the table. But as he got closer, I could see he looked very sketchy and was acting strange. His clothes were disheveled and he seemed jumpy. Before I could say anything, he was right at my table demanding I stay quiet and not move. I froze as he pulled out a gun and pointed it directly at me. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears as a million thoughts raced through my mind. Was this really happening? Was I about to die over a date? The man grabbed my wallet, phone, and walked right off my body. I sat there helpless, unable to move or make sense of the situation. It was like all my senses had gone numb. Before I could plead with him to leave me with something, he hurried off just as quickly as he had appeared. I'm not sure how much time passed as I sat there in complete shock, trying to process what had just happened. Eventually, I spotted a woman at the table next to me who had her phone sitting out. In almost a whisper, I explained what had transpired and asked if I could borrow her phone for a quick call. She agreed right away and seemed very concerned. I called the police and did my best to explain the situation while still feeling totally disoriented and rattled. The dispatcher said officers would be there shortly. Within a few minutes, 2 police cars pulled up outside the restaurant. I provided them with descriptions of the man along with every detail I could remember. They jotted down notes and seemed sympathetic, but said robberies like this were incredibly hard to solve without any substantial evidence or leads. After giving my statement, the officer said I was free to leave. I walked out of the restaurant feeling so many emotions: violation, anger, shock. But one thought kept nagging at me. I pulled out the woman's phone again and logged into my dating app. Just as I suspected, Sarah's profile was gone. She had either deleted her account or blocked me. That's when it all clicked. She had never intended to show up for our date. The past 2 weeks, the flirty messages, it had all been an act to get my guard down for this robbery. In hindsight, there were some concerning signs I'd overlooked in my excitement about Sarah. But never did I imagine I was being lured into a literal crime scheme. I felt so foolish and ashamed that I had let this happen. But more than anything, I was angry that someone could be so manipulative and ruin my trust like this. I decided to just go home and try to rest after the traumatic night. But sleep did not come easy as I kept replaying the events over and over, torturing myself with what I should have noticed or done differently. When I finally did drift off, I had terrible nightmares of the man chasing me. The next day, groggy and shaken, I made the decision to delete the dating app. I needed time away after what had happened to regain my faith in people. Weeks went by where I kept reliving that ill-fated first date, wondering where things went wrong. But eventually, my anger subsided and my confidence came back. I knew I didn't want one terrible experience to ruin my chance at meeting someone special. When I finally did download a dating app again, I was far more cautious and vigilant. I looked for any red flags in profiles, kept conversations in the app longer, and told friends the details before meeting anyone. It took some time to rebuild my trust, but I'm grateful I didn't give up entirely. I just had to learn the hard way to be more protective of myself out there. Sarah was a painful but necessary reminder that predators do exist, even on the most innocent of dating apps. I still get queasy when I think back to the absolute worst first date I've ever had. It happened last year when I was trying my luck on one of those trendy new dating apps. After a few lackluster conversations, I started chatting with Damien. He was cute in a boyish way in his pictures, with warm brown eyes and a kind smile. Through our messages back and forth, he came across as sweet and thoughtful. When he asked me to dinner, I happily accepted. The day of the date, I took extra care getting ready, blow-drying my long blonde hair and choosing a flattering wrap dress. I dabbed on perfume and makeup, feeling excited for the night ahead. As I drove to meet Damien at the Italian restaurant we picked, I cranked up the radio and sang along, filled with that thrilling pre-date anticipation. I was a few minutes early, so I sat down at the cozy table in the back perched underneath a romantic string of lights. I ordered a glass of Chardonnay and scanned over the menu, impressed with the options. A few minutes later, I saw Damien walk in. He was just as cute as his photos, tall and broad-shouldered with a boyish charm about him. I waved and he broke into a grin, those warm brown eyes lighting up as he made his way over. We settled into easy conversation, covering the basics like our jobs, families, pets, and hobbies. Damien was so friendly and attentive, asking thoughtful questions and making me laugh with funny stories about his 2 rescue dogs. I found myself really enjoying his company, pleasantly surprised by how well we were clicking. The waitress came by again and again to refill our glasses as the hours passed unnoticed. After we had finished our tiramisu, Damien suggested taking a stroll through the park down the street. The night was warm and clear, so I readily agreed. We meandered along the paths, passing other couples holding hands. Caught up in the romantic ambience, I didn't hesitate when Damien reached for my hand. In the moonlight, he looked so handsome. My heart did a little flutter when he gently pulled me closer as we walked. Up ahead, I spotted a stone bench surrounded by twinkling fairy lights and fragrant rose bushes. It was such an enchanting little nook, like something straight out of a movie. Damien led me over to the bench, and we sat down, thighs touching. I felt giddy like a teenager on her very first date. When Damien leaned in, I closed my eyes and waited for what would surely be a magical first kiss. But instead of his lips touching mine, a sudden, horrific smell assaulted my senses. It was like the stench of a dirty diaper, only exponentially worse. I recoiled in disgust, looking around for the source of the noxious odor. That's when Damien leaped up from the bench, panic written across his face. He exclaimed something about needing to use the restroom immediately before sprinting off down the path, leaving me stunned and bewildered. Then it hit me. Damien had pooped his pants, right in the middle of our romantic first date. I sat there, waves of nausea washing over me at the realization. This handsome, seemingly normal guy I'd been having such a nice time with had a bathroom accident like a toddler. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. What felt like hours later, Damien shuffled back over, his eyes glued to the ground in shame. He muttered apologies, explaining that the wine and pasta must have loosened up his bowels more than he realized. He swore this had never happened before, and that he wasn't incontinent. I finally found my voice, though I was still struggling not to vomit. I told him it was best we call it a night now. Damien offered to walk me to my car, but I declined as politely as I could manage before hurrying off to find my car. The stench clinging to my nostrils, I drove home in a daze, intermittently shaking my head in disbelief and cringing in horror. Of all ways I imagined this first date going wrong, I never could have conceived of this fiasco. A grown man defecating in his pants mid-date. I couldn't fathom how mortified I'd be if I were in his shoes. I kept replaying those blissful moments right before the smell hit me. 1 second we were strolling hand in hand, and the next my date was sprinting to the bathroom after crapping himself. Talk about a mood killer. Needless to say, I did not see or speak to Damien again after that traumatizing night. His parting words echoed in my mind on the drive home, making me shudder and gag anew. In the weeks that followed, I was hesitant to get back out there into the dating world. Damien had really done a number on me psychologically, but eventually I worked up the courage to try again, albeit with some newly instated precautions. From then on, I refused to do any more romantic, secluded garden strolls on first dates. All these months later, Damien still stands out as the most horrifying first date I've ever had by far, but at least it makes for a pretty unforgettable story. I guess you never truly know someone until you've seen them at their absolute worst, and boy, did Damien show me his worst that night. My dating life did eventually recover from the trauma, and I finally met a great guy who has never once pooped his pants in my presence. So in the end, I got a good boyfriend and a cautionary tale to pass on to all my single friends. As mortifying as that night was, I learned to always trust my instincts on first dates. At the first whiff of anything suspicious, I won't hesitate to make a quick getaway. Damien really reinforced the importance of safety and vigilance when meeting strangers from the internet. So for that, I guess I owe him thanks. But I definitely won't be seeing him for a second date. I still vividly remember that ill-fated first date I had last year through Swipe Right, a popular dating app I had recently downloaded. Brandon's profile initially caught my eye. He was an attractive, athletic blonde guy with bright blue eyes and a charming smile. His bio painted him as laid-back and fun-loving, someone who enjoyed working out, watching sports, and spending time with friends. We started messaging back and forth, just casual get-to-know-you conversations about our jobs, hobbies, favorite foods, and so on. Brandon came across as friendly and interested in learning more about me. After a week or so of increasingly flirty exchanges, he finally asked if I'd like to meet up for dinner. I enthusiastically agreed. I had been striking out repeatedly on dating apps, with most conversations fizzling out quickly. I was thrilled to have finally made a connection that might lead to an actual in-person date. We made plans to meet that Friday night at a trendy new restaurant downtown I had been wanting to try. I arrived early and slid into a corner booth, compulsively checking my hair and makeup in my phone's front-facing camera as I waited nervously for Brandon to arrive. Right on time, I saw him stroll through the front entrance, looking just as handsome as his photos. When he caught my eye, he flashed me a broad grin and made his way over. The conversation flowed easily right from the start. Brandon was attentive and charming, asking thoughtful questions and listening intently to my answers. We discovered we shared a similar sense of humor, and I found myself laughing more on this first date than I had in a long time. The wine and delicious food heightened the romantic ambience. When Brandon suggested heading back to his place for a nightcap after dinner, I didn't hesitate. The date had gone perfectly so far, so I saw no reason not to continue the fun. We took an Uber across town to Brandon's apartment complex, an upscale building with manicured gardens and a sleek lobby. But as soon as we walked into his unit, I noticed an odd, stale scent hanging in the air like spoiled meat mixed with pennies. Brandon seemed oblivious as he led me further inside. The living room itself was tidy enough: leather furniture, sports memorabilia, shelves, giant TV. But when I went to sit on the couch, I realized the armrests and cushions were crusted with dark reddish-brown stains. Dried blood. I perched gingerly on the edge, afraid to touch anything else. Brandon emerged from the kitchen with a couple of beers and settled onto the disconcerting couch as if nothing were amiss. As he chatted casually about work, I tried to subtly inspect the stains, my stomach churning. Some appeared faded with age, but others seemed more recent, flaking slightly when I scratched at them with my fingernail. I felt queasy imagining what sinister scenes had caused such extensive staining. When Brandon finished his beer, he suggested giving me a tour of the small apartment. I reluctantly agreed, hoping the other rooms weren't as nightmarish as the living room. But the kitchen was even worse. Teetering stacks of crusted pots and pans in the sink, every surface coated in sticky food splatters and crumbs. My anxiety mounted as we moved to the bathroom. The tub and sink were caked with scummy orange grime. But most disturbing was the army of disposable razors littering the floor and counter space. At least 5 lay scattered around, many clogged with curly hair and flecked with rust. The wastebasket overflowed with blood-spotted tissues. I fabricated an urgent need to get home, no longer able to tolerate the creepy vibes. Brandon acquiesced and led me back through the gore-spattered living room toward the entryway. I breathed a sigh of relief once we were outside his door, as if I had escaped some sinister dungeon. But there was one final shock. On the elevator ride down, Brandon casually mentioned having a child out there somewhere who he had never met. Who springs that kind of personal bombshell on a first date? I muttered a hasty goodbye before rushing in my car, skin still crawling from the nightmarish apartment. As I drove off, I could see Brandon watching me with an inscrutable expression from his front stoop. I vowed never again to take such risks meeting internet strangers. No more going to their homes or even getting in cars with them. From now on, I would insist on staying in crowded public places for any first dates. And I would be much more selective, thoroughly vetting anyone from dating apps and going with my gut. If I got even an inkling of bad vibes from a guy's profile or our messaging exchanges, I wouldn't even meet up. That ill-fated night was a sobering reminder that you can never be too cautious when online dating as a woman. I was lucky things hadn't gone worse, as far as I knew. Brandon was just really unhygienic and odd, not actually dangerous. But I might not be so fortunate next time. I could have easily wound up as a tragic headline or crime show episode. Trusting my instincts and putting safety first would be key. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I refuse to let there be a second time. I still cringe when I think back on my ill-fated first date with Sam from Tinder. I should have known something was off when he immediately asked me to watch a sketchy sales pitch video after I sat down with my coffee. But I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt at first. I didn't want to shut him down right off the bat in case it really was harmless. Oh, how wrong I was. Sam had seemed nice enough when we first matched and made plans to meet at a coffee shop downtown that weekend. I arrived first and grabbed a table while waiting for my drink. When Sam walked in, I greeted him cheerfully and he smiled back as he sat down across from me. But before I could even get properly settled, he turned his laptop screen my way and asked if I'd watch a short video he wanted to show me. He explained it was about a vacation club he had recently become involved with. I hesitated, immediately suspicious of both the phrase vacation club and being asked to watch a video by someone I had literally just met. But Sam looked eager and excited to share this with me, so despite my reservations, I reluctantly agreed to watch for a few minutes. I figured maybe it was just some harmless travel website. Upbeat music played as images of happy people flashed across the screen. Couples lounging poolside, friends toasting cocktails on the beach, families splashing in the ocean. So far, it seemed innocuous enough, just marketing for some kind of travel company or service. But that initial impression didn't last long. Soon, the upbeat voiceover kicked in, full of buzzwords like be your own boss and unlimited earning potential. Phrases like multi-level marketing and recruit your friends and family started popping up. I shifted uncomfortably as I realized this was definitely an LLM pitch of some kind. Sam watched me closely the entire video, gauging my reaction. I tried to keep a neutral, if slightly skeptical face. After all, this was our very first meeting. I didn't want to upset him right off the bat over what could just be an overzealous hobby. Maybe it was best to just politely sit through the rest of the video. But as it droned on about earning money and cheap travel while selling this so-called vacation club membership to others, my skepticism turned to suspicion. When it finally ended on a cliffhanger urging viewers to contact the person who had shared it for more information, Sam turned to me eagerly. "Well, what did you think? Pretty amazing opportunity, right?" he asked with a smile. I took a slow sip of coffee to buy myself a moment before responding carefully that it seemed interesting, but also raised some red flags about multi-level marketing schemes. I reminded him that I thought we were just meeting for coffee. Sam's enthusiastic smile dimmed a little at my lukewarm response, but he powered through the objection. He insisted it wasn't sketchy and said he knew MLMs had a bad reputation, but this vacation club was different. He then launched into the full sales pitch, explaining the minimal buy-in cost and how quickly I could earn it back and more by recruiting other people. He kept insisting it wasn't a shady pyramid scheme, though all the red flags of one were there. As he rambled on about incentives and fast cash, I tried interjecting that I wasn't interested, but he steamrolled over my protests. After letting Sam give his high-pressure pitch nonstop for what felt like eternity, I finally managed to firmly state that I was not looking to join any type of multi-level marketing organization, regardless of his assurances. But instead of accepting my no, Sam looked incredulous. He tried to guilt and shame me, saying I must not actually want opportunities to earn extra money and travel if I was passing this up. But I held my ground, explaining diplomatically that while the idea of more cash sounded nice, I had serious concerns about that MLM model in general. No matter how I tried to politely decline, Sam kept up the hard sell, refusing to take no for an answer. He switched between insisting it wasn't a shady pyramid scheme and using every manipulative tactic in the book to pressure me into signing up on the spot. I kept trying to end the conversation, but Sam would just talk over me and bring it back to the vacation club opportunity. After enduring what felt like an eternity of this high-pressure baiting and guilting, I finally had enough. I cut Sam off mid-sentence and firmly stated I had zero interest in his sketchy MLM, no matter what he called it. I made it clear I was leaving immediately. As I gathered my things to go, he called after me that I was making a huge mistake and passing up a phenomenal opportunity. I just waved dismissively and headed out the door, relieved to escape the hard sell, but annoyed that my time had been so wasted. I shot off a text to my girlfriends as I left, warning them about Sam's persistence in pushing some vacation club mimon scheme. Then I went home to decompress and be grateful I had trusted my instincts enough not to get roped into his skimmy club. In hindsight, I should have been more wary when Sam asked me to watch that video right off the bat. But lesson learned, if any future online dates try to pitch me great opportunities they want to even invest in, I'll be declining immediately and exiting stage left. Fool me once, shame on you, Sam the MLM Hanbot. Here's hoping I don't get fooled again anytime soon. I should have known from the moment I swiped right on Harry's profile that something was off. His pictures seemed normal enough, hiking, hanging with friends, petting a dog. But his bio was oddly vague, just a few emojis and his height. No hobbies, no job info, no clues as to what kind of person he was. But he was cute in a rugged way and was feeling impulsive that night, so I sent him a quick message. "Hey, love your dog. What kind is he?" Harry responded right away, but avoided answering my question. He just said, "Hey beautiful, wanna meet up this weekend for a drink? I know the best bar downtown." I hesitated, wondering if I should try to chat more first or suggest a coffee date instead. But my friend Sarah's voice rang in my head, telling me I played it too safe and needed to start saying yes more. So I pushed my doubts aside and agreed to meet Harry at Murphy's Tavern on Saturday night. I arrived at Murphy's early to scope out the scene. It was pretty low-key for a weekend, with a mix of couples on dates and friend groups laughing over beers. I secured a booth in the corner so I'd be able to see Harry come in. While I waited, I chatted with the bartender and ordered an IPA from a local brewery. I was starting to relax and get excited for the date. but as soon as Harry walked in, my stomach sank. His energy just felt off. He seemed agitated, constantly scanning the bar and cracking his knuckles absent-mindedly. When I waved him over, he slid into the booth with a grunt and avoided eye contact. Up close, his smile seemed forced and didn't reach his eyes at all. Trying to break the tension, I complimented the tattoo peeking out from his coat sleeve. "Cool ink, is that new?" I asked. He just shrugged and kept fidgeting with his hands under the table. I noticed he hadn't taken off his big winter coat, even though it was plenty warm inside. When the server came to take our order, Harry cut me off and tersely asked for a Coors Light. Taken aback, I just smiled and said I'd have the same. I had imagined us laughing over our mutual love of IPAs, but clearly Harry was not interested in engaging. As we waited for our beers, I tried making light conversation about the weather and my work as a graphic designer, but his responses were always curt and distracted. Things only got more uncomfortable when our burgers arrived. I made a reference to a popular show I thought anyone our age would know, The Office, Friends, Seinfeld, but Harry just stared blankly every time. At one point I said, "That's what she said," after a comment about appetizers. The joke totally bombed. Harry's eyes narrowed and he said, "What are you talking about?" I was trying so hard to keep the mood upbeat. I asked where he grew up, what music he liked, if he followed any sports teams, but he seemed completely unaware of any pop culture or slang. His answers were vague one-word mumbles, punctuated by swearing under his breath. When I said I needed to use the restroom, Harry suddenly stood up and insisted on walking with me to the door for safety. I was so put off, but didn't want to cause a scene, so I just hurried to the restroom alone as soon as we got to the hallway. By the time I got back to the table, I was already plotting my escape. I mentioned I had to get up early the next day and should probably head home soon, but Harry pressured me to order another round first. I politely declined, repeating that I really needed to get some sleep. When the check came, I made sure to pull out my wallet right away and offered to pay my half, but Harry angrily waved me off, slapping down cash and saying he would take care of it. The gesture might have seemed chivalrous, but after the night I'd had, it just felt pushy and aggressive. Outside the bar, Harry asked for my number again so we could plan our next date. Thinking fast, I lied and said I was busy with work all next week. As I turned to go, he suddenly shouted after me, "But you owe me for those drinks." I hurried to my car without looking back. My hands shook as I tried to start the engine. I kept checking my rearview mirror to make sure Harry wasn't following me. That night, I got a series of strange texts from Harry demanding I pay him back for the beers and food from our date. He grew increasingly angry when I explained politely that I didn't think we were a good match. At one point, he said I would regret this. For a few days, the ominous texts kept coming every several hours. Eventually, I had to block Harry's number for my own peace of mind. I felt rattled thinking someone I'd barely met could spark such obsessive rage. In hindsight, there were so many red flags with Harry. His empty profile, his evasiveness, his volatile moods. I'm still learning to trust my instincts and not feel pressured into situations that make me uneasy. This experience was a startling reminder that you truly never know someone based on a few photos or a chat app. From now on, I'll make sure to really take the time to get to know a potential date before meeting in person. No amount of urging from friends like Sarah is worth risking my safety and well-being. At least I got out of that night unharmed, if a bit wiser, but definitely left me wary and much more cautious about online dating. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon in late April when I decided to finally take the plunge into online dating. After a recent breakup, my friends have been encouraging me to get back out there and try meeting someone new. Though I was hesitant at first, I ultimately created a profile on one of the most popular dating apps, uploaded a few cute photos, and tried my hand at writing an intriguing bio. Within a few days, I was pleasantly surprised by the number of likes and messages coming my way. I took my time browsing through profiles, exchanging messages, and looking for someone who seemed compatible. After about 2 weeks, I matched with a guy named Mark who caught my eye. He was around my age, handsome. His profile painted him as laid-back and easygoing. We messaged back and forth for a couple days, cracking jokes and finding common interests like hiking and live music. When he asked if I'd like to grab dinner that weekend, I decided to take a chance and agreed to the date. I spent that Saturday afternoon getting ready, taking extra care to look nice. I styled my long brown hair and loose curls, and did my makeup with a subtle, natural look. After trying a few different outfits, I settled on a flattering black dress and heels. I finished the look with some simple jewelry and a spritz of my favorite perfume. As I checked myself out in the mirror, I felt both nervous and excited for my first online date. Mark had chosen a popular Italian restaurant downtown that sounded perfect for a first date. I arrived right on time and gave my name to the hostess, who led me to a cozy table near the back. Mark was already seated, but stood up with a smile when he saw me approach. He looked just like his photos, tall, muscular build, short brown hair, and sparkling green eyes. His firm handshake and polite hug put me somewhat at ease. We settled into our seats and a waiter promptly appeared to take our drink order. Mark suggested a bottle of red wine for the table, which sounded good to me. As we looked over the menu, we began chatting about everyday topics like work, family, and hobbies. Mark said he worked in construction, had 2 siblings, and enjoyed playing hockey in his spare time. I told him about my marketing job, being an only child, and my love for yoga. Our conversation flowed smoothly until our drinks arrived. As soon as Mark took his first sip of wine, I noticed a subtle shift in his demeanor. He began drinking at a rapid pace, finishing his first glass before I was halfway through mine. His bright eyes took on a glassy look, and he started fidgeting in his seat, his fingers tapping the table. When our food came out, he devoured his pasta like he was starving. I picked at my meal slowly, a knot forming in my stomach as I observed Mark's odd behavior. We had made it about halfway through the bottle of wine when Mark's personality seemed to change completely. He went from talkative to sullen and brooding. His responses got shorter and he seemed distracted, his eyes darting around the restaurant. An uncomfortable silence fell over our table. When I asked if everything was all right, he mumbled something under his breath I couldn't quite make out. I debated whether I should just make an excuse and leave that point. But before I could act, Mark was flagging down our waiter and ordering another bottle of wine and a whiskey. I cautiously nursed my one glass, not wanting to end up as intoxicated as Mark clearly was. As he gulped down the harsh liquor, he started ranting loudly about conspiracy theories and corrupt politicians. I sat there frozen, mortified as nearby tables glanced over. Finally, I worked up the nerve to say I should get going as it was getting late. At my words, Mark suddenly slammed his fist down hard, rattling the table violently. I jumped, my heart racing as the restaurant fell silent. Mark's face was red, twisted in anger over my suggestion to leave. I threw some cash on the table and hurried outside without looking back, just wanting to get to the safety of my car. I heard Mark yelling behind me as his heavy footsteps followed me out. My hands shook as I fumbled to unlock my car door. Just as I pulled it open, Mark appeared beside me, shouting slurred obscenities at the top of his lungs. Before I could react, he wound up his muscular arm and smashed his fist into my windshield with alarming force. I stood there stunned as glass exploded around me. Frozen in fear and disbelief, I didn't know what to do next. Mark continued his drunken rampage, palming his fists on the hood and doors of my car. I snapped back to reality and rushed to the driver's side, terrified he might try to harm me next. I quickly locked the doors and sped off, watching Mark in my rearview mirror as he kicked the side of my car before stumbling back inside. My whole body shook as I drove home, replaying the traumatic events in my mind. I just couldn't reconcile this angry, violent person with the charming, easygoing guy I had been messaging for 2 weeks. It was clear now that Mark had some serious issues lurking under the surface. The smashed windshield and dents on my car would serve as chilling reminders of that for some time. In the days that followed, I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder when I left my apartment, worried that Mark might reappear. I avoided that whole area of downtown, too anxious about potentially running into him around there. I debated filing a police report, but without major physical damages or harm, I wasn't sure it would go anywhere. It took me a few weeks to start feeling normal again and regain my sense of safety. I had my windshield replaced right away, but the emotional damage lingered. I deleted my dating profiles for a while after that, too shaken to risk something like that happening again. When I finally reactivated them after a couple months, I was much more cautious about who I agreed to meet in person. I chose only busy public places I knew well and always drove myself. At even the slightest red flag, I didn't hesitate to promptly leave the date. The chilling experience taught me that you just never know someone's true nature until you spend time together in person. I learned to trust my instincts and not feel pressured to stay in an uncomfortable or scary situation. Though it was disheartening to have my optimism about online dating shattered, it made me a safer, more vigilant dater moving forward. I just had to remember that while most people were kind, there were unhinged individuals like Mark out there that you couldn't let your guard down around.
Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.